Samaya Fire. My name is Samaya Fire, and we are so glad to have this opportunity to be with you all this morning. I am the lead consultant, organizer, and movement builder for Share Time Wisely Consulting Services. And we are working with MIWSAC, Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, to address anti-Blackness, a very important issue to be addressing at this time. And so thank you to Sister Courageous and Sister Aki, and we're waiting on Sister Comfort Dondo to come in. So we will move on until she gets here. So Nana Minimal, who is a first generation African woman who works with me, she has a doctor's appointment this morning, so she'll be on just a little bit later, but she does plan to join us this morning. Nana is an executive director of a local program in Louisiana, and she will join us shortly. So I'm going to turn it over to the coalition, and if you all could do your intros, and then we'll get our guest introductions afterwards.
I can start. Good morning. My name is Nicole Matthews. I'm the executive director here at MIWSAC. I'm Anishinaabe from the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. I've been at MIWSAC for 20 years next month. I was the first staff person hired and worked alone until 5 years in, and then Christine joined, and Guadalupe. I grew up and have lived most of my life in Minneapolis, and it's heartbreaking to see what keeps happening. I now live a little bit outside of Minneapolis, but yeah, we've been talking about anti-Blackness and having these conversations and how they show up in the Indigenous community for a long time. And so I'm really grateful that we've been having these conversations, and I look forward to hearing the panel today and to continuing our work. So welcome.
Good morning, Yahani Washday. I'm Rebecca Baylog. I do some of the comprehensive sex trafficking work in Indian country in Alaska. And I've been with MIWSAC for almost 2 years. So I'm really happy for these conversations, and I hope we have a good time together.
I'll go. Me and Christine in that look. I'm Jennifer Scoggin. I'm the office manager at MIWSAC. I pretty much support all these guys and the beautiful work they do in like the home base and keep things, I guess, administratively running, or try to. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for being here and for all of this work.
And I'm Christine. I've been with MIWSAC for 15 years now, which is wild. I grew up in the Red Lake Reservation in northern Minnesota, and I live over here on our home reservation, the White Earth Reservation. So, and echoing what Nicole says, you know, it's just out of control. It's been out of control for a really long time. And, you know, I think we're committed at MIWSAC to do what we can with our own people to try to be more vocal, be more involved, be more, maybe even aggressive. That's a bad choice of words, but we got to be real deliberate in our own communities. I guess that's how I feel this morning, is people can ignore things, but it keeps showing up. And the deeper we can get into our own community and start talking about it, the stronger we're all going to be in where the intersections of violence are happening. So yeah, we're really grateful to have y'all come in and talk with us. So yeah, welcome. Miigwech.
Hi, good morning. My name is Linda, and I have a serious instability with my internet this morning. I tried to get on a whole nother computer and I hated going onto my phone because it's hard for me to work from that little device. I have been at MIWSAC probably a little over 6 years, and about 20 some years before that, I've been working as an advocate. And I'm also, I'm somebody who survived many of those traumas and watched my mother survive and my grandmother. And then as much as I knew as an advocate, and how I thought I could stop what was happening, several things happened to my children. I'm a mother to 6. I have adopted a child, and I have 4 other women who call me mom, who I took part in raising. And I have a sincere commitment to make life better for not just my own people, but for all people. And I think it's that interconnectedness. And I was just thinking about what one of my first big spiritual teachers was explaining to me. He said, "You are not just indigenous, you are a person of the universe." He said, "We are all connected, not just indigenous focused." Because I kept snapping back to that because it was like beat into my head. So I am indigenous, but I also am a resident of this universe, and I'm connected to all living things. So that's it. Welcome. And I'm happy to see everybody here. I am sorry for the people who are running into problems getting online. I am asked to have more understanding as I myself experienced it. Even trying to get on 15 minutes early doesn't help me sometimes. So I'm going to trust that everybody who is here is who is supposed to be here at this moment. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for your introductions. And we'll go ahead and get started with our conversation today. This just to kind of make everybody comfortable. We know what the group agreements are, if everybody's had a chance to look at those, so that we can feel like we're in a safer space to just be who we are and bring all of ourselves to this space. I do want to give recognition to what has recently happened in Minnesota. A Black woman lost her son. I think it was this past weekend, to another violent state-sponsored law enforcement killing. 22 years young Black man. And that is exemplary of why we are doing this work for sure. How do we all be, what Linda said, people of the universe and relatives, and advocate around situations like this that are going on too often and for way too long. So just want to make sure that we are, aware of that most recent incident happening there in Minnesota on the ground. So I was hoping to have Sister Comfort Dondo to be our first guest this morning, but we will move forward. She is located there in Minnesota and was wanting to honor her as first guest speaker this morning. But I'm going to move on to Aki, who is a tribal woman in Virginia. And I will read a little bit of her bio so that we'll know who she is. She's a member of the Sapani Nation of Ohio. She descends from the Scott, Falcon, and other families from along the Roanoke River in Halifax County, North Carolina, the Rogers family of North Carolina, and the Harris, Moss, and Gilliam families from Mecklenburg and Brunswick counties in Virginia. She's active in her tribal community, as well as the broader intertribal community via council, traditional singing and dancing, promotion of language revitalization, activism, and continuance of living culture. Professionally, she is a graphic designer and a landscaper, but her most important role is as a mother and a wife. She is married to Kim Hedgepeth of the Sapani and Nassamond families from Halifax County, North Carolina, and Virginia. She descends from multicultural families whose origins include Indigenous Native American, excuse me, African American, English, Irish, and more. Being born into and raised in the Indigenous Native American culture, this is the identity she lives by, while claiming, honoring, and respecting all of the representation from all of her ancestors. She is happy to share her experiences and let it contribute what it may to the broader good. So thank you, Aki, for being with us this morning. And I'm just gonna turn it over to you for you to share your wisdom, your thoughts, your experiences with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, Pilalu, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity just to speak with you and to be here. This is important work that you all are carrying out, and I'm grateful for it. Here on the East Coast, I don't know much about what goes on outside of the Southeastern Woodlands area, or rather the Eastern Woodlands in general. But I do know what my experiences have been here as being an active member of the Indigenous communities here since I was born. So I know how important this is. And then also on the side of, you know, being from a multicultural family, I also have a vested interest in just making sure that my relatives are safe and okay on all sides, including my Black or African American family members. And then, you know, MIW is something that we're very aware of here in North Carolina. I actually live in North Carolina. But thank you all for your attention to these matters and your willingness to do something and work towards it. My experience here is all that I have to share, and I hope it's something that can contribute to what you are doing. My experience is as a multicultural Indigenous woman, which is kind of a difficult place to be in here in the Indigenous communities. Because if you look at me, you can tell that I'm multicultural, right? I can't go around and say I'm full blood Indian, because I'm not, and I wouldn't choose to do that even if I could, because I wouldn't dishonor my other ancestors by doing that. But here in the Southeastern Woodlands, it's not a popular thing to be Indigenous and Black. It's taboo, which is, you know, it's not so much taboo because if you throw a rock, you're going to hit someone who is Indigenous and Native American. What's taboo is to, sorry, my cat's trying to jump up on me. What is taboo is to claim your Indigenous heritage if you have Black heritage. The interconnection between the histories of the African American and the Native American here is a long-lasting relationship that is oftentimes denied and repressed. Here, we don't want to admit that we have ties to the Black communities, that we are not just tied to them through marriage or whatnot, but we are tied to them by blood. And for those of us who bear the resemblance of a mixed culture, it makes it much more difficult to fit in. And those who don't bear the resemblance tend to fall more into a denial than even addressing the situation. back when everything happened with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, it really stirred the nation, and including Indian country. And that is when I started noticing that my relations and my relatives started addressing the anti-Blackness in the indigenous communities here. And it not just became, but it still is now a hot topic of how we treat those who are indigenous mixed with African-American versus those who are indigenous mixed with any other culture. And it extends back to colonialism. And but there's many factors that contribute to it. The indigenous communities received racism from the Black communities as well. But that also was a result of the racism that was being shown towards the Black communities from other communities, including Caucasian communities. So it's all connected, it's all interlaced, but it's come down to some of those things we don't have to perpetuate in our continued generations. And it's just become a way of life here to continue those things, even those, like myself, we have a tendency to, if we have our foot in the door, to look at the next indigenous person who is bearing a resemblance of Black, and we tend to look at them differently as a sense of confirming our own identity to be a part of the community that looks down on the next, So anti-Blackness is not an external problem here, it's an internal problem in the indigenous communities. Because if everyone who had indigenous roots stood up and claimed it here, especially in the North Carolina, Virginia area, you would see a lot of them have a brown skin complexion, a browner skin complexion than what you see now, because the issue is those who are mixed with Black are not claiming their indigenous roots because they can't, or because it's more difficult. It's easier in the indigenous community to separate as a Black person if you are mixed with Black than it is to be indigenous mixed with Black. There's been many things that have contributed to the degradation of our identity as indigenous here, including Pleckler's list and what he did over here in Virginia, reclassifying indigenous families as mulatto back in the, 1830s or 1930s or so. I don't remember exactly when that was, but he took many indigenous families in Virginia who were listed as indigenous or Indian back then, and he reclassified them as mulatto, which now is something that genealogists are aware of, but for a long time it took away the identity of these people. And so that in combination with when our family started actually marrying with the Black community, our paper identity was taken away and our physical identity diminished. So we began to take on an identity of just Black because those communities who did not mix did not accept those who were mixed blood. And then there is the loss of culture that has taken place here as opposed to further west. You have to understand that we took the blunt of colonization because we were the first hit. So we had the longest standing interaction with other cultures. So naturally we look different. We have a loss of culture to a certain degree because we were impacted for the longest period of time here on the East Coast. So now we are working hard here to even be okay with identifying as Eastern Woodland Indians, because we have a tendency to want to always be seen as what the rest of the world sees as Indian or indigenous. Everybody wants to be seen like a Lakota because that's how indigenous people have been portrayed as stereotypical for the past generations and they see someone else and they're, you know, we dress different here traditionally, or we dance different here traditionally, we sing differently, we have different instruments. The powwow culture is a intertribal culture that was, it's a way for us to celebrate being indigenous across the Indian country. But we each have our individual traditional ways that are different. Even the songs and dances, the ceremonial things that are done even out west is different than what you would see in the movies or in a powwow. You know, we have our public events and we have our private events. So embracing being an East Coast Indian, you know, we dance different, we dress different, you know, even that is a more recent revitalization, let alone people who are of mixed race, especially Native American and Black, to be able to claim their indigenous culture. So it's a bifold journey here for those who are indigenous and Black. But my point is that the issue with anti-Blackness starts in the indigenous community for those who are mixed. It's not something, an outside issue. And it goes both ways because most families are mixed over here. And, you know, we also see anti-indigenous in our Black communities because of the way that we feel about having been shunned from our culture, our grandparents. You know, when you married, when an indigenous person marries or has children with a Black person, it kind of changes their acceptance within the community. And it changes how their children are accepted in the community. So hostilities are born through that and it's passed down from generation to generation. Can I address some of these things in the chat here?
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Oh, really? That's good to know, Rebecca. I'm sorry, I'm just reading your message here. That's good to know. Probably have. I used to be very active. I guess we all were more active prior to COVID, right? More active in the powwow circuit. I was gonna say I used to be more active, but I think that falls for all of us. Been more active in. I grew up. My father was a well-known artist of a very dark complexion, Walter Day, and he was well known up and down the East Coast, especially Virginia and North Carolina. And so I've been traveling the circuit with him, so that's very, very possible. Pleckler, what is it, Walter Pleckler? He created what is called the Pleckler's List, and that is the list of families that he had reclassified from indigenous to mulatto. And yes, that is very true. It does. The word mulatto, that has been an incredibly powerful word for understanding your roots. It's something we now understand. Well, most genealogists who have worked in the indigenous communities, especially in the East Coast, are aware of what that term can mean, but you know, it has so many meanings and you have to tie more into it than just the term mulatto. You have to understand, you know, where that family was at and what kind of community they lived in, and what that family history is and their connection to the rest of the families, and also the time frame of it. But yes, it does affect, for those tribes whose genealogists require the word Indian on census records, it does affect the enrollment status of many people. In many cases, it can prevent it. I work on the genealogy committee of my tribe, and I'm aware of the effects of the Pleckler's List. But of course, you have to keep in mind, mulatto also does have the connotation and the understanding of being mulatto. That could mean Black and white, that could mean white and Indian, that could mean simply Indian. There's so many things that surround that word that you have to be able to read the full story behind it, not just look at the records, because the records, you know, the records lie. They don't tell the full story of our people. Our people are much more complex than the mistaken names and the misspellings and the miscategorizations and the wrong households that are written on these records by those who did not care who our people were and what they were about and where they were from and where they were going. So, oh wow, I'm gonna have to save that, the letter. I don't think I actually have that. Thank you for sharing that. That is basically what I have to share. Not to
Thank you, Aki. Want to check in to see if there are any questions for Aki, any comments.
Hi, Aki, this is Rebecca. I didn't know, I saw your last name and then I knew, basically. And your presentation and your sharing today was awesome. I have shared, I'm an East Coast girl myself. I'm here in Pennsylvania. So I have shared some of the East Coast isms and all the isms that be with our relatives at MIWSAC. So it was really nice to have you bring in firsthand accounts of the South, right? And all that brings in. And so my little side hustle, I do a little consulting. It's called Hybrid Love Stories because I'm Gypsy and Native. So there's that hybrid. And my dream with the Shinnecock and all the struggles that they have, even though they're on the north of the Mason-Dixon line, and your tribe and all of the newer federally recognized tribes, because we know that they would not give federal recognition in the South for so long. It was like a wasteland of no Indian country. And it's a dream of mine that I cannot lead, nor do I want to, but it would be so great to have Black Indigenous folks on the East Coast really push through, you know, the middle of the country, out west, including Hawaii and Alaska, and really do education that could, I don't know, expand on diversity of what hybrid love or being mixed race means, right? And especially now, because natives are mixed. Almost everyone in this room is mixed that are identified as native. So I'm just so grateful for you that you're already doing the dream that I have in my little private self. So thank you so much.
Thank you for what you're doing. I'd love to talk more with you about it.
Sounds great.
This is Christine. So first, a key is earth in our language up here in the Anishinaabe country. So I'm like, oh, look at that old earth woman there. Thank you so much for all that. And it's just really standing out to me. And I've always known it, but I haven't known the actual laws and policies and legislation that's been passed, right? And what I'm kind of hungry for is things like those tactics, right? That Plecker's list is a very similar tactic to what we've all gone through. And for us to be able to have a graphic or a document or something that lists the similarities is something that I'm really interested in, because I think people think the tactics were different and they're not, right? They're real similar. And so I don't know, it's just interesting to me. It's obviously scary and sick, but it's also interesting too, because once you understand the tactics, you see that it's not about us, right? It's really about land grab, power grab, resource grab, and all the things that they try to use to divide us. It's just all words on a piece of paper, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I really appreciated this talk. Thank you very much.
Well, one of the sad things about it is, as you know, our indigenous culture is an oral culture. And if you look at the way enrollment works now, the tactics of colonization and those such that you were speaking of have diminished our numbers, because we have lost any importance on our oral traditions and the family histories that are passed down orally. Granted, we are in a state of world now where it has become popular to be indigenous and to claim indigenous when you're not, which is a strong contrast to what our grandparents endured, right? It wasn't popular to be an indigenous person. We were proud to be indigenous for those who stayed in a strong indigenous community, but those of us who were staying in a community where you were persecuted from nearby for being indigenous, it wasn't such a popular thing. You were what you were, but you didn't necessarily, it wasn't something you sought to be if you weren't. So I think that's where a lot of protectiveness came over our culture, because there's a lot of misrepresentation of those who carry the bloodlines of our ancestors, because it's become popular to be an Indian, right? But we have now seen the lack of the faith in the oral tradition, which is one of the strongest aspects of our culture. And, you know, there are institutional acts, but there are also the acts of the small little things that have contributed to the disappearance, if you will, of our people. Native America is very strong and thriving very well if you counted all of us that had a strong connection to the Native American community. But because of these acts and things that have been done, both institutionally and on a small level, our numbers have dwindled far smaller than what is the actual representation of our ancestors that still walk this earth. You have, if you look at census records, you could see you might have a grandparent who's listed as white 1 minute, mulatto the next minute, and Black the next, and Negro on the next 10 years. And, you know, it changes because this is even smaller scale than institutional. It was up to there was no accountability for the accuracy of even down to the spelling of a name or what race you actually represented. You know, it was up to the person who did not care who you were to start with, to write down what they wanted to classify you as. And it was all about classification. If you had you stayed out the sun last summer, you might be written down as white or mulatto as an indigenous person. But if you got in that sun, we tan. You get in that sun, the next 10 years, you're gonna be a Negro or Black, whatever they felt like putting you down as is what you became. So it was larger scale, just like Pleckler, but it was also, smaller scale. It's all these things that continue to work together to continue the colonization of this nation. And then we as indigenous people are continuing the work ourselves when we do this anti-Blackness and do this to each other. We are dwindling our numbers down unnecessarily. We have cousins that have the same amount of blood quantum, if you will, as we do, but we don't want to recognize them because they look differently. And then, yes, culture has a lot to do with our identity. It's at the core of our identity, but you don't have a culture if you've been shunned away from it. You don't have that access to culture because you're not allowed to even learn your culture beyond a certain degree. So it's both institutional and internal, and on a smaller level, such as the census records and those who take the census. For example, when my husband and I got married, we both tried to put Black and Indian on our to get our license. And it just so happened that it was someone we knew that was processing the license. And she told us, she's like, they're only gonna choose one. If you put Black and Indian on here, they're only gonna put one. You can't be both. And, even in the census records, when, you look at the population of Indian people in a certain area, those people are only the ones who put Indian alone. Otherwise, you don't count if you're putting 2 or more races. You don't count as in the Indian community. So the numbers are not accurate, especially here on the East Coast, because we have so much mixture. The numbers are not accurate, an accurate representation of our people, because it's skewed. It's skewed for the benefit of the story that we have disappeared. My language is technically, if you look up the Tulalosaponi, our language is classified as extinct, which is offensive to me, because we are not extinct. You might say not widely used, you might say dormant, but it's not fair to say extinct. As long as one person is speaking one word, we're not extinct. But there's a huge movement here to revitalize that, as well as reclaim our original culture and traditions.
Thank you, Aki. You have given us so much, such a special offering. My synapses are firing just like at 100 miles an hour. And I think we will have a little bit more time to ask more questions and give more comments. But thank you so much for what you have given this morning. Absolutely grateful. We have Sister Comfort on now, and wanted to pass the mic to her. I don't have your bio, Sister Comfort, handy, so if you could introduce yourself, that would be great. And then after Comfort, we will have Sister Courageous Fire. So we have been given a little bit more time, but we'll just see how this goes, because we want to get as many nuggets, as much offering as we can. So are you there? I can't see her. There you are. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for grace. I was kind of caught up with something else, but I'm glad I could be here this morning. My name is Comfort Dondo, and I am the founding executive director of a culturally specific program. It's called Pumulani, Minnesota African Women Against Violence. And we work at the margins of immigration justice, racial justice, economic justice, on ending violence against women and girls. I actually the primary service provision for us is the African immigrants. It's very, very specific. But then we service all historically marginalized and underserved communities as well. I'm not quite sure if there was a leading question that can inform what I would like to share this morning.
I also wanted to make sure that it is noted that you are there in Minnesota,
yes.
By way of Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we're just basically having conversation about the issue of anti-Blackness in Indian country, and what it means for Indian country to support Black, African, Caribbean people of color in around those issues. So whatever wisdom you have, whatever experiences you have that you would like to share will be much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I guess I'm a storyteller, so I would just say the experiences that I've been witnessing, including some recent ones, I want to share around the nuances around Black. I'm a first-generation immigrant. Before moving to the US, I was not aware of my Blackness at all. And then when I went to college, everything was being assigned to me, like, you need to join the Black movement, join this Black. And so my Blackness became apparent to me. And then as I was navigating the space here in Minnesota, I started learning, and I'm still learning, that there is a lot of anti-Blackness. There's a rhetoric on anti-Blackness when it comes to the BIPOC community. So anti-Blackness within the Asian community, I've witnessed that. Anti-Blackness within the East Indian community. I haven't had a lot of interaction with anti-Blackness within the Indigenous community, I personally have felt more connected to the indigenous, with feeling that there's a lot of parallel between the African culture and the indigenous culture, but the anti-Blackness overall within the BIPOC has been, depending on where you are. So if you're talking about Southeast Asian, it's anti-Blackness, it's an umbrella. And then there's the African American. A lot of the time we've had these discussions in my community, there's also an anti-immigrant, anti-Black immigrant dynamic that happens in that community. So it's a lot of layers. It depends, with whom you're dealing with. So the work that we've been doing recently has been to build a bridge, with the Cultural Wellness Center, is building a bridge and start conversation around some of the BIPOC, some of the brown communities, and they're just overall anti-Black. And then we've also been diving deeper, talking about within the African American community, where that comes from in terms of like being anti-Black immigrant, being anti-African. So these are just like some really complex dynamics that I have been witnessing in my work. And this year, we're really working hard to starting conversations. I believe that a lot of it has had to do with a lot of, for lack of a better word, I'll say it's a lot of lack of knowledge of the other. So anything that folks are not really familiar with, if I don't take time to understand the community that, let's say my sister Nicole is serving, if I don't take time to understand that history, for example, I really feel like our African immigrant people, they are moving from Africa, either coming from war or moving just like immigration in terms of school. They just come here. I don't feel that there's enough true learning. And when I say true learning, is the real history of these specific communities, of the indigenous communities, of the African American community. We normally have, and I've had these conversations with a lot of African immigrants, we have a lot of conversation, or we have a lot of education about the indigenous community or the African Americans from Western TV back home. And we come here sometimes with those biases. And when we start interacting within those spaces, we still have those biases. And I'll give an example of personally myself. My life transformed when I interacted with the Cultural Wellness Center with Elder Atum. And I started learning how colonization itself had impacted me and how I was viewing the other brown communities. And the cultural self-study that I did, which I'm now sharing with my community, helped me understand our oneness, but not everybody is in that space. And I would love to see everybody in that space. And actually, when you do the cultural self-study, you understand how much more we are one than we are apart. Because at the end of the day, there's the white supremacy that is deeming everybody else the other, which they call us BIPOC, all right? But then within our BIPOC, whatever, that term, which I don't really care for, within that space, we are divided. So I like to talk about divide and conquer. So they still conquer us because we are dividing within ourselves. We're establishing false hierarchies within ourselves. And this is how I look at it, because I have gone through my own cultural self-study. I have understood myself from a place of how colonization did that to our psyche. And I'm very aware of it. And I think for me, my takeaway that I wanted to share in this space is in the brown space, in the historically marginalized and historically colonized communities. I think if we took time to do our cultural self-studies and tracing the dots going backwards, we'll see how actually we are one, and the reason to actually unite as one, because I think the effort has been to divide and conquer, and that is still what we see today. And with that, I think I'll yield my mic so I can save time for the rest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll see if there are questions, comments for Sister Comfort. So much given. Oh my gosh. And I agree with you on that term BIPOC. Oh, man, I don't know, we've got to find another way. Definitely. Any comments, questions?
I just had a comment. Good morning. So wonderful to see you always. Hopefully we can see each other in person sometime soon. It'd be lovely. So I'm just really sitting here with this notion of Blackness and how that shows up here on this continent and on this land. And when you said that you were never aware of your Blackness until you came here on this land and started going to college. And I'm just really sitting with that, and how this country we have just developed such a distorted hierarchy around colorism, and colorism shows up in so many of our communities, and is also very tied to anti-Blackness, based on, for us as Indigenous people, we have a notion of blood quantum to prove who we are, but we also have some deep-seated stuff around colorism. So anyways, I don't know if I have a question. I'm just sitting here with that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I would just like to say that it's very powerful what you said about learning how colonization has affected our own perspective, even on an individual level, because that's really where it starts, on the individual levels. And then as individuals begin to address their own views, it becomes a community. That's a very powerful statement on looking into that. It's kind of like when I was mentioning how people who are of mixed race here, we tend to take on the looking down on the next person who's mixed. If we feel that we've been included, we try to take on that same negative attitude so that we can be a part of that inclusion. And that's just a continuation of that colonization. I think that's very powerful what you said.
Mhm.
I have a question. You referenced a couple of times that you had started a cultural self-study. And I want to know, how does a person do that? And maybe that's an idea for us to start with our membership. First, start with ourselves, of course, on staff. And we are starting right now. Every day we get up and breathe. But I mean, how would we help our membership to be able to do that in a way that is empowering, I guess is what I want to say. There is there's a lot of shame and embarrassment and a lot of guilt and pain and trauma associated with all of that rolled up. So it makes it real easy for people just to say, I'm not doing nothing, or I don't want to hear that. I have my ideas and this is the way it is. And we had conversations in the past, is my understanding. I wasn't there when those conversations happened, but I have listened to many conversations. And I think it's that too. I was thinking about, where do we learn that? And it's coming right from our own family and the misinformation that they have been given and spoon-fed since they were little. And so it's coming from media, and it's coming from print, and it's coming from the public education system. I mean, and if we have to be strong in who we think we are and who we're trying to be, and then to be able to sit down and say, don't be scared. There's no fear in looking at who I am. I want to make it so it's empowering. Where would a person start to have a cultural self-study?
Thank you so much. That's a very wonderful question. I think for me, the resource that has really transformed, I cannot even imagine how I would be moving in the world if I had not had the chance of this blessing that I got from Elder Artun, who is one of my mentors. I was so British in my thinking than I thought. I was taught to demonize my own culture. And I remember after doing the cultural self-study, for the first time, I stopped wearing synthetic hair. I started embracing my hair, and there's a certain power that came over me in just saying, this is who I am, and I'm proud of being who I am. For the first 17 years of my life, I was told that's bad, that's bad, that's bad, you are bad. So there was an internalized hate in there. So I would say I think the first place to start would be the Cultural Wellness Center as a resource. And the last time we did the cultural self-study, we were over 30 something students, and there were also European there were European students in class with me, and Elder Atum had their methodology actually has everybody trace their true cultural self-study, their true history. Because for me, when I heard cultural self-study, I was just thinking of historically, folks who have been marginalized and not mainstream like European Caucasian. But actually, by the end of the study, we realized that when we all connect to our culture, including what's not so good about it, there's also a lot that's been good about it. And so holding on to both. And I'm glad that you asked in the question, how do you deal with the shaming? And I think there's a way that the Cultural Wellness Center does that. It helps you to process. It was really hard for me to realize that I was very colonized in my mind, in my thinking. And I had to let that sit, and I had to process how those things affected me. And I also had to take the good that came from that in building my resiliency. So I would definitely point out the Cultural Wellness Center as a resource. I don't know if there's more resources that anybody would like to share, but thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hold my comments because my mind is firing all over the place. But I want to take a moment for Nana. Oh, she's saying it's noisy where she is right now. I was want to give a moment for Nana.
Can you hear me?
Yes. If you could
Okay.
real quick.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nana. I'm sorry it's noisy where I'm at. I'm waiting on my doctor, but what I heard so far has been amazing. Thank you, Comfort, for sharing what you shared. My dad's Nigerian, or first generation Nigerian, so I could relate to some of the stuff that you were saying, experiences that I've heard from him, and also of African Americans sometimes shunning me and not accepting me as being African American, even though my mom is. So I just wanted to thank you, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you, Nana. Nana works with me at Share Time Wisely, and I wanted to make sure she had a chance to introduce this morning. So our next guest is Sister Courageous Fire. I will introduce her as a national technical assistance provider regarding domestic violence, a published curriculum developer, facilitator, and women's motivational speaker. Courageous Fire understands it takes doing something difficult to make necessary change. She left a marriage of over 13 years once she realized she was being abused by her partner in several ways: psychologically, verbally, economically, spiritually, sexually, and through coercive control. She teaches about the differences for the Black woman dealing with domestic violence in the Black community, to other Black women, and to the mainstream systems that serve Black women. She creates access for Black women survivors to establish a healthy relationship, financial and emotional legacy. And she's willing to share her personal experiences of being a Black woman, not for shock factor, not for conversational pate, but to hopefully make sure inroads for lasting change. Courageous is honored to be a member of this listening panel. So I'm going to pass the mic to her and let her get started with her message for us this morning. Thank you, Sister Courageous, for being here.
Thanks for having me, beautiful. Good morning to everyone. And to the other two guests, I appreciate both of your offerings. I just put a link in the chat for everybody that I think you'll find helpful to reference some of the things you'll hear me say. I'm having an interesting experience lately on panels, so bear with me here. Usually I have a very distinct switch. And I will explain that to you as well, because that is part of my programming as a Black woman in America and as a Black woman in Iowa, that you have a switch that you operate in. So when you are in a space that does not feel safe, you do not emote, you do not display expressions, you keep a flat affect, you don't emote, and you keep whatever you're going to do very focused on whatever it is you came there to do. And I am noticing on these panels recently that that switch is broken. And I am feeling the part of survivorship more than I'm feeling the part of professional. So as I listened to Sister Aki, my heart broke sometimes while she was talking. As I just looked at the face of my sister Comfort this morning. And for those of you who know her, she really is her name. But I see a lot on her today. And so I feel my sister's weight this morning. And then I heard the Queen, Samaya, read about me. And instead of them just being words, it landed on me again this morning like it was brand new. So bear with me, because you're going to see that. And I now realize that's okay, because I've given myself permission to do that and just be who I am as I am wherever I show up. But let me explain why that's not something that works well for Black women, especially. And I think that will help contribute to the conversation. I feel like Sister Aki, my experience is what I have to share. And so I hope that it's helpful in the work that you're seeking to do. And I appreciate that you're seeking to do the work. So finding out that you are being abused is a tricky spot to be in, right? If somebody's knocking you down the stairs, you're well aware that you're being abused. But if someone is really good about couching their abuse in certain language, certain cultural norms, because the abuser was a Black man in my case. So he knew how to utilize our cultural norms of the Black church, of the way that God is not questioned, or what is couched in his name is not questioned, the way that patriarchy is not questioned, whether it's in the husband-wife relationship or whether it's in the father-children relationship. And so you have to get out past those standards to actually realize that something's wrong with some of the ways that those co-sign on abuse. If you are, in my culture, beating your children, that was a common thing. You know, oh, you got in trouble, you got a beating. That wasn't classified as abuse, even if there were marks. It was just like, oh, she tore you up. But it wasn't classified as abuse. And so when your mate, who is a so-called man of God, is not sparing the rod because he doesn't want to spoil the child, the scriptural reference says to you, his place says to you, okay, you don't question that. Even if it feels uncomfortable to you, even if it seems overboard to you, you just don't question that. Your body being his, you don't question that. There's no body autonomy. You belong to him. And so whatever he wants, even if you don't feel comfortable with that, you find a way to work up into that, because that's what your role is. And so living like that for a Black woman to actually even identify abuse is confusing, especially when it is not the physical that is not tied to sexual. And then how do you even wrap your head around being raped by your husband? Like, that's not a thing. I mean, you're supposed to have sex. So why is that a problem for me? Maybe it's my own shortcoming, and my discomfort with intimacy. Maybe it's my fault. So you don't even know how to move through those things and process them accurately. When you get to the place that you actually do stumble across information that allows you to identify accurately your state, you then run into the rest of what Black women run into. And so I'll kind of walk you through that. First of all, when we feel threatened as a Black woman, we don't seek help. When we feel afraid, threatened, we don't seek help because we are strong Black women, and that's actually something we're supposed to wear with pride. And so you don't tell other Black women because, first of all, you'd be stupid if you let that person do those things to you. It's not them committing crimes against you, it's you letting them. So it's your downfall as a Black strong woman that you weren't strong enough not to let that happen. So it is it's shameful. So that's not something you're going to go and tell another Black woman. So that is a cutoff from the help that you might get in that department. Furthermore, in abuse situations, you've been isolated. So if you have family, you don't actually talk to them, and they don't actually come by and see you like that anymore because they've been trained that the abuser doesn't want them there, so they don't come. So they don't cause problems in your marriage because they don't want to come between the man and the wife. So out of respect for your relationship, they've been obedient and they stay away. So now birthdays, holidays, things like that, you're not present at the family stuff and they don't expect you. So they don't come and interfere in your personal celebrations, holidays, vacations, whatnot. So now there is an actual secrecy of your life, right? They don't actually know what you do, where you go, and you're not a part of things that they do. So you're not going to readily reach out and say, hey, I've noticed there's a problem, because of the isolation. You've been blamed by your family or your friends or whoever was your circle for the isolation. Well, if she really cared about us, she'd still come and etc. So if you want to reach out to them for help, you first have to go through the channels of the apologies and the explanations and hoping that they will forgive and then be willing to extend themselves to you. Because in the Black community, there is such a thing of loyalty, right? And that is almost an unspoken law. So if you haven't been loyal to me, I have no reason to be loyal to you. So if you have abandoned family and gatherings and whatnot, you have cut us off. And so we then do likewise. So then when you come back, now I'm offended that the first thing you want when you come back to me after you so-called wronged me by ignoring the family is now you want us to do something for you. How dare you? So that's not an option. We make a lot of our relationship decisions based on the church and its standards, dogma, etc. And so the Christian standards in the Black community are very high for um, making sure that you maintain your marriage. That is godly, that is appropriate, and that makes you a good leader for your children and generations. So if you're not doing that, pastors don't want to support you, and other church leaders don't want to support you. They're going to tell you to work that thing out. They're going to tell you to forgive, because to forgive is part of the Christian principles of how you should be living. So if you're not willing to do that, first of all, you've fallen down in your relationship with God. So you haven't been taking things to the altar like you should have been. You've drifted away from God. And so along with the embarrassment that you already feel for letting him do the things he's doing, now you're also embarrassed because you're not holy enough. You haven't been maintaining your relationship with God enough. And so you shouldn't expect God's assistance when you've abandoned him. So that avenue is cut off for you as well. So the only thing that's left now is the mainstream systems. So at this point, you're desperate. You go, not because you're comfortable in those settings, but because you feel you have no choice. You go. But when you go, right, you go with that, with your culture. So first of all, my culture dictates that my business is very private, right? So anything that's going wrong in my home, especially going wrong with my Black male partner, is very private. There is still quite a, because as Black girls, we are raised to take care of the Black men in the community. Even as young girls, we're taught to take their coats, make their plates. You know, if we have brothers or cousins, we're taught to make their beds. We're taught to comb their hair. We're taught to help them when they mess up. Like if your male brother, cousin has something that they are not good at, well, you should have helped him with that. You know, he's not good at that. Why didn't you take care of that for him? The best food is set aside for the males in the family. You know, you're supposed to leave that big piece of chicken for your dad. You know, you weren't supposed to take that piece of meat, that's for your brother. And so we are last in our communities, and we are supposed to support them and protect them. And we know that. So even though I'm in crisis and I'm going to a place that's white, that has the systemic racism, that has the white supremacy overtones, I still have to protect that Black male image, and I still have to protect the dirty laundry of my community. So when I walk to that front desk and you ask me, how can I help you at the front desk, I'm already put off, because I want you to take me someplace private for me to tell you what's going on. The minute that I back away, the minute that my appearance changes, what you're seeing is that I'm startled, but what you think I'm displaying is that now I'm being difficult. And so there's certain things that I'm going to display, as far as the furrowed brow or the raised voice, or the hand gestures, or even, you know, the hand gestures that get to the point of doing this or like this. And all of those things now make the other person that's not aware of my culture feel like that's aggression. And so now my fear and my shame and my feeling threatened is met with threats, right? You're going to have to lower your voice. Well, you didn't say or else, but it was implied. And so I'm thinking, if I can't get my voice lowered, because the more nervous I get, the louder I'm gonna get. And so now I'm panicking because I can't make myself talk softer, but I hear the or else implied. Now I see other people standing up, and a standing from a sitting position is aggression to me, right? And so that means you're coming at me, you're getting ready to do something, or you're getting ready to refuse something or cut off something, but I know that you're the last place that I have to go. And so my desperation now is going to manifest probably in profanity, because now I'm frustrated. And that is profanity and frustration is very cultural for the Black community. There is a tapestry that is woven in joy, in all heightened emotions for us, in profanity. If I'm really excited, there's profanity. If I'm really happy, it's profanity. If I'm frustrated, it's profanity. Like that, it's a language. And so now, as I'm standing there frustrated and feeling like I'm about to lose the last piece of what could be help, and then I'm wondering if there's a button under that you're calling the police on me, and I know I'm Black, and I know how I am viewed by the police. So now I feel like I'm literally being threatened in a life or death situation. This is what happens with Black women not being looked at as real victims, or people with real voices or real issues by other Black women, by our communities, and by society in general. And so I don't know that I understand how that might be viewed by my Indigenous brothers and sisters, but I know that I feel like the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing is because we need a translator. We need somebody to understand how we look in crisis and what that means and how that feels. I am sure there is a very different dynamic of having a country and then having somebody come in and be like, nah, it's my country now, and you're going to live on that postage stamp over there, as opposed to us being dragged here against our will and saying, no, you're going to build this country that we stole from these people. Okay, get busy. And I'm never going to recognize you as a human. There is something about being a Black American where you know that on paper, you were never intended to be a human, ever, like ever. There is something very, what's the word I really want for that? Diminishing doesn't get it. Erasure, I guess, is the closest I can come to that. And I could relate to Sister Aki saying that she was offended by being told in print that her language is extinct. It's like, hello, I am right here. I'm not extinct. I guess that would be akin to the way that I feel walking around knowing that when I show up in a space, I don't show up as a human, I show up as a tool. I'm often invited into spaces as a favor, not because I deserve to be in that space, though I understand quite well that I do. I'm invited there as a so-called favor, and I'm never expected to say my fee for me being here, like all the other professionals in this space, is this much. I'm always expected to just be glad to be seen. And though there is some truth to that, because as a Black woman, although I'm supposedly so angry and aggressive and scary, and I've been told all these things in different settings, intimidating and all of that, I'm still invisible. And my voice is still silent. As loud as I can be at times, I'm still not heard. So yeah, it's really great to be called forward to be seen, but what are you seeing me as? Because if you still are seeing me as a tool, there's no value in that for me, since that's not what I am. I'm a human being. And I would say too, for me, that there is quite a balancing act that you do as a mother with two Black girls, right? I want them to understand that they matter, that they are valuable, but I also have to give them the truth of life, right? They live in America. And so for them to walk around and not understand that is for them to be left open to being blindsided by the world showing them, we don't see you, we don't hear you, we don't value you. So trying to do that, that teaching of self-love to them, and at the same time teaching awareness to them uh, um, is a difficult identity crisis, um, skewed intersection, mismatch. Um, but it's one that is there. So I guess if there was a takeaway that I could leave for this group, it would be take the time to learn the language. Take the time to learn the language, because the language makes a difference. And I know that there's, Ebonics dictionaries. That's not what I mean, because that's just cultural appropriation. If you walk around talking as though you are speaking from an Ebonics dictionary, take the time to understand how a Black woman shows up, what is authentic to us, and how that translates in body language, in facial expressions, in our clothes, in our makeup, all of that, because that helps to that helps the balance of everything that you're working on as far as anti-Blackness. And I'm bold enough to say that if you understand the Black woman, and can provide that equity and balance for her, you're in a much stronger position to understand the Black culture, period. Because if you understand the most ignored and most overlooked and most marginalized of the Black community, which is the Black woman, then you have much easier times understanding the rest of the Black community. I guess I can leave it open there for questions, comments.
Thank you so much. You broke it down, down. Thank you so much. What a gift. The whole package, everything. So again, I'm leaving it open for everyone else's comments and questions. And I see this going somewhere, somewhere so far. Come on, what are your questions and your comments for Sister Courageous Fire?
I think I see people processing, and you know what? You said my name, and so let me just add that nugget too. Name is important, right? As a Black woman, I didn't even realize how much more I was going to gain when I changed my name. So my name was always something that some other person chose for me, right? So my last name was always the name that the slave master chose to force upon my ancestors that they took, right? But when you get married, then your name is the name that another man says is your name, right? And the last man that said my name for over 13 years, said it at times with such cruelty and hatred that it started to actually make me sick to introduce myself with that name. So I knew the name had to change. And it was important to me that the name come out of the name that I had already, because Courageous Fire didn't just pop up one day. She was birthed out of the pain that her former self carried, right? And labored through to produce Courageous Fire. So my first name used to be Andrea, and I thought it only meant womanly until I actually did a little bit more digging and found out it means courageous also. My middle name used to be Kay, but I found out that that means fire or fiery. And as I looked on the experience that I had just dragged me and my daughters out of, I realized that what I truly needed was that name, that specific name, because it gave homage to who I was while truly defining who I'd become. And so I realized one day when one of my sisters was talking to me about my name, she was just like, do you realize how you just got away from carrying the slave master's name? And so that was a whole new celebration of, oh, I got away from the abuse so many fold. I was trying to get away from the abuse of the one man, but in changing my name, I got away from, in a certain way, a certain chokehold of the abuse of the entire oppressive society. So I felt I needed to share that with you.
Thank you for that. That is so Kujichagulia. You know, that is so Kujichagulia, and I get that because my name is Samaya Fire. So we'll have a conversation about that one day too.
I love that.
Fire to fire, you know, iron sharpens iron, right? So whew, lots good nuggets there. I hope you all are taking notes through all of these offerings, because it is just a lot to receive and to process. One of the things that you talked about, sister, that I want to go back to, especially as it comes to the church abuse culture. And you were talking about how, you know, for us in that particular, faith communities, your body is not yours, you know, and has scripture to mandate that your body does not belong to you. You have no body to defend, to own, to be, to have personhood in, you know, because someone else, you're submitted to someone else about that. And for years, I have definitely, you know, wrestled with that, you know, and then came to a conclusion that, yeah, that's just how I feel about this. You know, this is my body, and I can determine whatever about my body. But the systems, not just the cultural system of faith communities, but all systems say that this is, you have no control, no jurisdiction, no, you know, ownership of your own body. From the medical system to the criminal justice system, to the faith systems, to the political systems. If you think about some of the legislation that is going on right now around abortion, and I don't know how people feel about that, but I'm going to put it on out here because that definitely is directed toward Black women, right? So when you talked about the whole thing about what it means when we how we discipline our children, and how the abuse is your fault, regardless of what the perpetrator is doing to you, whether that's physical, sexual, you know, in the community, because once your name gets diminished, or your name is put down in your faith community, you have so many hoops to jump through in order to reclaim yourself. So I am sitting so much with all of the offerings from you, because you all took it, you all took a full circle. It's amazing how all of your stories talk about how we don't exist, and we're having a really huge living experience that really erases us and who we are. So I don't know, that's my reactions, my comments, my response to what you all have shared. I am just so grateful for what you all have shared and opened up to us. This is more than a gift. It is priceless, absolutely priceless. Does anyone else have comments, questions for the whole, for all three of them?
I had something. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I courageous. Oh my gosh. And there's so much going through my head, like you said, processing. Thank you so much for just sharing authentically who you are. And I just loved how you walked us through the experience of going to a mainstream program. I'm a director of a mainstream program. And even though I have the majority of my staff, it's like 51% are identify as Black women. Well, hold on, we have one Native woman and the rest are Black. We're women of color. And we still have issues when we have people of color, women of color coming in. And what exactly you were saying is, I just was like, oh, I wish my team could hear this, because just the experience on the other side, people don't think about that and how our systems have been set up for, anti-Blackness and against people of color. And I try to, as being a Black identified person of color, and just try to, there's so much I try to break down, but it's still a lot of work. In the way that you just describe every step, I was like, oh my gosh, I need you. I need somebody to just share that with them, because I've seen it. And where, as you were saying, it didn't matter if it was white staff, I had Black staff also reacting the same way as you were describing it. And I told them, I was like, once I talked to that that survivor, I talked to her one-on-one, and I was calm, listening to her, understand, just had to hear her, that she came down, like it, her voice came out. She just wanted to be heard. And privately, as you were saying, there's some stuff you just don't air out. And I was just like, we had to have that, first of all, compassion and understanding, and just to listen and hear what their needs are, even if they're not saying it. Okay, well, they're not really talking right here. Maybe I should take them back somewhere. Just listen in the silence. And so just thank you so much. And there is so much other stuff, especially when you said about your name. I was just snapping my fingers over here about like claiming your name. And I struggled with my name, but fortunately I don't have, my name is not a name of the oppressor. Like, it's Nigerian. So I struggled with the acceptance of, mainstream white culture with my name. And I'm like, well, my name has so much more meaning than what these people say. Like, I love it. So I am so in love that you love your name. You named yourself like for what it is. So thank you so, so much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for, my head is like swirling with so much. I too am sitting with the, having been in advocacy before, and I think, I worked in a mainstream program, and people are afraid of loud, people who are loud or who swear or who are pissed off, and it can be uncomfortable and hard to sit. And also people have to, I've had the same experience where I've had someone come in who was just pissed off and just like throwing pill bottles on the desk and screaming at me. And after just listening, the person calmed down, because they just wanted to be heard. They didn't, it wasn't about me, and it wasn't about, it was wanting to be heard and seen. Thank you for naming that. And I guess I don't have a whole lot of like really articulate thoughts to put together, because my brain is like so full right now. But I guess I'm just sitting with like how much I have seen, how Black women are dismissed for being loud, or for the perception that if you're loud, that means you're angry at, such and such, rather than I'm pissed off at the system, right? Like I'm, so anyways, sitting with that. Also, I love the story of your name, and it makes me think of, like I have an Indigenous name, and I don't always introduce myself with that, but it is Manidu Beneshikwe, and it means spirit bird woman. And I don't always introduce myself with that because not everybody appreciates or understands. And sometimes I'm like, should I or shouldn't I? But thank you for sharing that. And it just kind of validated that I need to be introducing myself, because that's truly who I am at my core. And I should be using that name to really honor myself. So thank you so much. I have so much more, but I don't know that I have any articulate thoughts to put to it. So just a lot of appreciation. Thank you.
Would you say your name again for me?
Manidu Beneshikwe.
Manidu Beneshikwe.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Courageous Fire. Very nice to meet you.
So on that note, I would, so can you talk a little bit about name, but still with naming, and also to comfort and everyone, just everyone. When you use your name and people call you by your name, what do you hear? And also to talk a little bit, like for those of us who claimed ourselves through naming ourselves. What was that like what was the experience like for you and your family? Because for myself, when I started using my name, or starting in 1988, it was a real live experience. Like, what are you doing? What is that about? And for people who didn't know me, it was easier for them to use the name, to call me by my name. But for family, it was a real experience, starting with my parent, my mother. So what was that like?
For me, I made a decision that nobody got to make a nickname. Nobody gets to shorten it. Nobody gets to still call me whatever, because of the reason that I changed it. It's like, okay, if this name is causing me trauma, what makes you think you get to still traumatize me and then say, I love you? Like, that's not love. That's not respect. My sister, it's just me and my sister, no brothers. And so she struggled with that probably harder. The closest person to me, I think, was that struggled the most was her. And I think it's because, we're both in our 50s. And our father was sexually abusive to my sister when we were growing up. I didn't know about it until I became an adult. And so he purposefully planted a wedge between the two of us. And we have really struggled to find our rhythm as sisters, as adults. And I think she felt like, okay, dad's passed now. Our mother is very toxic. I don't deal with her for that reason. My sister still chooses to deal with her. And so I guess she's probably feeling like, well, dad's gone, with all the complexities that come with that for her, right? Mom is a trip. You're all I got. And now you're not connected to me that way. Like now there's this new foreign body that's being introduced between you and I. And I think she really struggled with that, but she realized that she was going to have to get past it. And what I said to other people that were like, but I still get to call you that. And I'm like, no, you absolutely do not. There's not, is there a nickname for you? No, there is not, because there was no shortcut to this name. So Fire is my last name. No, you don't have to use that every time you address me. But you will call me Courageous. You won't call me Cece. You won't call me Rage. You won't call me anything else. You can call me Courageous, because that's my name, period. And I'm loving when I explain that to people who know me for decades, but I do explain it, and I do require that they accept it. You can stumble over it all you want to, but if you make no efforts, we're not going to continue.
Good morning. Hi, this is Rebecca. I think I've done this 5 times in 22 years in my professional career. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm burning my medicines and I'm taking a healthy risk because my mentor says, but there is so much spirit to a name. It's how you're identified, self and externally, right? And that acceptance, it means a lot. In the spirit of the name, and I call it mojo. I call the magic of our faith, the magic of the universe, the magic of the energies. I call it mojo. So I was raised in an abusive household where I stood alone. I don't want to cry. And then I was raised in the mountains of Pennsylvania, one of 3 from elementary, middle, and high school, brown people. Everyone else was mountain white. And then I entered the movement where the majority of my 22-year career, I was one Native woman, Native Gypsy, working with Black women, right? And then my name, my spirit name that I've only shared less than a handful, this might be my 5th time, is Rebecca Ishnila Naji. And it's Rebecca stands alone. And the spirits told the name. And it, damn if it isn't true. There's a spirit in the names. Self-chosen, someone chose it for it, or the spirits chose it. Our names are really powerful. So I just wanted to enter that spirit world in our names, that it makes us stronger in our identity, wherever it comes from. Wapila, thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so full. I think I'm gonna need a moment after this, but thank you so much, Sister Courageous. I'm so blessed this year that from the last year that our paths have crossed. You're such amazing teacher for me. I want to say 2 things. I'm on a journey to build a bridge between the African immigrants and the people of African heritage whose ancestors were brought here a while back. It's an audacious dream for me, but I think you've given me a lot of tools to put in my toolbox. Thank you so much. I'll remember to remember the language. When I think about names, I go back to the word of God. I remember anytime Christ would appoint a new apostle, a new disciple, he would change their name. He'll change their name. And I was thinking about that in changing your name to what really speaks to your spirit, other than the name that was given to our ancestors as a way of dehumanizing. I was just thinking about the power of names. Why my mother called me Comfort was she was in an abusive marriage. My father and her had broken up and they were trying to get back together, and I was born. And she called me her Comfort. I was going to be the only comfort that she was gonna try to stay with my dad so she could keep the family together. So I think of my name that way. I think of my name when I show up and how I interact with people. Sometimes I say I try to be mean, but it's really hard to be mean when your name is Comfort. So I end up, always not being able to be mean. But thank you so much. I just wanted to talk about the power of naming and why Christ always renamed his disciples, and each name had a powerful meaning. And I also wanted to comment on what I wrote in the comment section. Cinnamon, thank you for sharing. She said that said I'm seeing that in the shelter where people had challenged pronouncing names and they came up with nicknames. And I wrote that, to call any name other than their original form is to negate their whole being. I think sometimes we take that lightly, but to call someone outside of their name is to really negate their real existence. And so thank you for reminding us of that, Sister Courageous. I just wanted to share that.
Can I jump in? It's Christine. So there's something that's, so thank you, holy smokes, all of you, thank you for all this. And there's something about names that I want to share, but it has to do with the ceremony with it, I suppose, maybe. That we're a living, breathing people. So even though we have like ancestral practices around for Indigenous folks, we have a lot of our own oppressive, fear-based teachings around who's worthy of giving names, and you got to fast, and you got to be appointed by a creator, and all kinds of things, right? But what I know to be true in my bones is that we are creating ceremony every day, and we get to, right? Like, and I don't know, this is just such a powerful reminder that we're all in ceremony every day of our lives, and it's moving and living and breathing, and just, I don't know, I just had to share that because I think it's so important that and the more that we can share this with others, that is possible. There's so much healing in that, right? Like for us, we do still have a pretty tight protocol around it. Like, you know, we pass tobacco to a person that we trust to be our spirits will be housed in the same house with them. So there's even some fear teachings in that, right? That we're tied to that person spiritually forever. Like, I don't know if all of creation would want that for us, but I don't know. There's just a lot to it that about freedom and who we are, who our spirit is, and who the spirit see us as, right? Like in our language, we'll talk about indigo. Like my name is Giwa Tayashi. So Giwa Tayashi indigo, when I say that, I'm saying the spirits know me as Giwa Tayashi, right? But there's something even more profound about what you're talking about, courageous. It's something that we dealt with it in the same way. Like we got renamed on all the papers as well, right? Like they named us John and Mike and all the things, right? Because they couldn't say who we are. So we experience similar things, but I don't know if I hear in my communities that similar story about changing our names because that's the name that was given to us, right? So I don't know, I'm just processing a lot of things. Really looking forward to more conversation. So miigwech. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh boy, thank you everyone. This has been so powerful. We have so much. We're so rich in ways that folks cannot even begin to imagine. They're lost. They're lost, truly. We have to close, and I really don't want to. We're going to have to think about some more ways to continue this gifting, you know. Thank you so much to Aki, to Comfort, to Courageous, to everyone in this room right now. Thank you so much for just being who you are, and make that the priority, you know, that we be who we are, because the world needs us right now.
Yep.
Right now. So Linda is usually the one who closes us out.
I had a question. Thank you, though. I was gonna, Courageous, can you message me your address? We have, you know, a gift of gratitude that we would like to send. Thank you.
And all three guests. Those addresses, please.
Yes, I got the other two.
You do? Okay. Thanks.
All throughout this time, I know that all of us are having some kind of firings going off, not just in our minds, but in our hearts. And it's all connected. So it's really good. I too have been sitting here lighting medicine and listening, and thinking other things besides what I'm listening to, it creates other ways of being. So I so much appreciate the opportunity because I have never in my whole life been given the opportunity. And as much as I've had the experiences here to take time to sit down and to think and feel about how we got to the place we're at right now. You know, I'll probably be an advocate, as will most people here, be an advocate the rest of their days, you know, as long as their health and everything continues. And learning how to love ourselves so we can show our relatives, including our children, how to love themselves. We can't do that if we don't take good care of ourselves. It's like they see it and they call you on your truth, you know, and what you're doing and what you're saying. They'll even say, you know, whatever it is they're seeing, they'll say it, from little tiny kids to your grandkids then will be saying. So it's best to try to be as authentic as possible. And it's true, the way you explained, I've heard this today, that, you know, you can say what you want to say, and love them and create a home that's filled with love, but the world is not filled with love. And there's reasons, you know, reasons why, and we need to help them to understand and teach with love, because the world will teach them, but the world does not love them. Until we can teach the world to love by being it, it's going to stay the same. And when we make these connections like we are right now, the glow gets larger, I believe, for all of us. And we'll walk away with good intentions, and maybe a healing has happened while we're sitting here. And it's going to continue happening if we let it, or we could grow stagnant. And we need the patience for those who have been harmed so much that they don't have the capacity at this moment to change anything because they're in pure survival mode. And that's heartbreaking, especially if it's our loved ones. So I just lit some more medicine. I'm on a little poor internet connection. It keeps going in and out. So, Creator, however we know the power that is outside of ourselves and external, but also existing inside each of us and in every living thing, whether it is an animal or a tree or a blade of grass or a bird or an insect, that we are all a part of creation. I ask that you take the words and the feelings and the life experiences and the love that has been shared and gently weave us together the way that you intended. And help us to not point out others in their weakness or in their fragile states, but to work to encourage and empower them, and to speak the truths that have to be spoken. And for sure, when inside we may be shaking down to our core. I ask that you help us to connect with people that are like-minded and more like-spirited, and that have the same vision, and to not be scared or exclude people who are not, because there was a time we did not know and we did not feel and we did not love the way we do at this moment. Please help us to work on these things together and to smile at the gift that is this moment. I ask these things for all of my relatives. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us and your experiences.
Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you, the coalition, next Tuesday. We'll see you next Tuesday, and I'll let you know what our agenda will be in advance for sure. But thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you
you
all.
so much. Bye-bye. Peace and light.